Hey there, everyone. Hope confirmation is starting off well for you. I thought I'd go ahead and get this video recorded and out to you so you can be working a little bit ahead. Not for sure if we will get to this coming Wednesday or the following Wednesday, but want to be ready either way. So here we go. First off, a couple jokes. There was a gracious lady who was mailing an old family Bible to her brother in another part of the country. Now, you know, when you go to the post office, they always ask you, is there anything breakable in there? And of course, she was asked this question and she thought about it and she says, only the 10 Commandments. All right, and some puns. The batteries were given out free of charge. A dentist and a manicurist married. They fought tooth and nail. A will, like a will written by somebody for getting rid of dispersing their earthly goods after they die. A will is a dead giveaway. If you don't pay your exorcist, you can get repossessed. And finally, with her marriage, she got a new name and a dress. All right, there we go. So today we're going to do a real quick intro to the 10 Commandments and then jump right into the first commandment. There's probably less to fill in from this video and more reading and family discussion on your part before you come to class. So again, make sure, remember that the intent is that these videos are watched as a family and that these questions that you'll be doing on your own are ones to be had and done as a family. Good discussions, hopefully. That's my goal. So let's jump right in. The 10 Commandments. For those of you who have seen this on TV or are old enough to remember it, this is a scene from the classic movie, I think made in the 50s, called The 10 Commandments. And it's got all kinds of Charlton Heston, Yul Brynner, if any of you know those names. It's usually on TV at some point around Easter, or it used to be. I don't know if it still is. So, yes, that's their depiction of Moses coming down from Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments. And actually, one thing that they have right, it's interesting, really the term commandments is, we see them as sentences, they're really words. So they're 10 words, which you can kind of see on that picture a little bit. So, okay, let's go. Let me make sure I got this going here right. There we go. Okay. So, before we get into commandments, like everything else in the Bible, one of my many podcasters that I listen to encourages people never to read a verse in the Bible. Meaning, you never just take one verse and pull it out of context, but you always have to understand the context. I know that you kids have learned this to some degree in school when you talk about context clues in terms of reading. In school, and so it's the same in the Bible. You have to understand the context that tells you more, that informs you about what God is trying to tell you here. So for the 10 Commandments, we have to understand that they were given to the Israelites at a certain point in time. Now, it's not as if these commandments weren't law before now. I think we talked about earlier, if we haven't, the law existed in the Garden of Eden before Adam and Eve sinned. It was already there. It was written on their hearts. God had given them things to do and not to do even in the garden. So it's not like these didn't exist before now, but now God's putting them in written form for us. And so it serves a little bit of a different purpose in a way. And we'll talk more about that as we go. We talked about that a little bit in the context of law and gospel. So these 10 commandments, as we have them listed in the book of Exodus, In the book of Exodus, again, it happens in a timeline and the story of salvation for God's people. And what we need to know about that, it comes from Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 to 2, sort of God's introduction to the Ten Commandments. He says, and God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God. See, again, real quick, it goes back and says, these words spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. So that tells us something. And if you'll remember back, this is Exodus chapter 20. The first part of Exodus up until now is the story of Moses and Pharaoh and the showdown with the 10 plagues, the exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt, the crossing of the Red Sea, and then once they cross the Red Sea, they're in the desert or in a wilderness. And they go from the Red Sea to a mountain called Mountain of God, Mount Sinai. At least we're pretty confident that's where it's at. So we're probably less than 2 months here since they left Egypt. What God is saying here is that, this happened after all these things. So why is this important? It's important because it's not like God came to Moses in the burning bush before he brought them out of Egypt and said, hey, I got these 10 things for you to do. And once you and the people of Israel in Egypt have done these 10 things, then I'm going to call you my people and I'm going to bring you out then. No, this is afterwards. So the Israelites did not have to do these commandments to be rescued or to become God's people. And it's the same with you and me. When God gave these to the Israelites, in terms of eternal consequences. Now, there are going to be consequences, earthly consequences, as there are for us today. But for the Israelites, consequences in terms of their how well they do as the people of God as a nation so many years ago. But in terms of eternal destiny, God knew that they would never, in fact, for any reason, God knew, right, that they weren't going to be successful. They weren't going to keep these commandments perfectly. And so they weren't a way, and they aren't for you and me today, a way for us to earn God's favor, to earn God's love, to make sure that God is pleased with us. He already is pleased with us because of Christ. Like God saving the Israelites and bringing them out of slavery in Egypt, Jesus Christ has brought us out of slavery to sin and forgiven all our sins. We are his children through baptism, so we don't do these things to earn any of that. It's simply he brings us into his family and says, hey, this is how we as a family live. This is how we do things. So again, important to remember that it's not as if these are 10 things we have to do to earn salvation, to earn our place in God's family. Those things are already given to us as gifts. And again, we talked about how this law works in different ways. In terms of law and gospel, we have the curb, the mirror, and the guide. So just important to kind of remember the consequence or the context for where God gave these 10 commandments to the Israelites. And it's not like they didn't exist, but it's not like on the day before this it was okay to go out and kill somebody. No, that's not the case. Okay. So I'm going to pause here for a second and have you guys take a chance, and I want somebody, maybe the student, maybe one of the parents, read this, and then we got a couple questions to answer afterwards. So hopefully you've read this by this point. If not, pause it and finish it, and then we can answer these questions. So, obviously, Jesus is asked which is the greatest commandment, and his answer is not necessarily what the man asking it wanted to know, but what Jesus answered with what he and you and I need to know. And he says he basically gives two commandments, and these two commandments are summaries, or they summarize all 10 commandments are summarized here in the two that Jesus gives. The first table, so that's what we would call the first, second, and third commandment, deal with our relationship with God. So that's no other gods, God's name, and the Sabbath day are the first three. And then 4 is honor father and mother, kill, adultery, and on down the line. Those all have to do with our relationship with people or our neighbor. So Jesus is summarizing all 10 commandments in 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Commandments 1, 2, and 3. And then love your neighbor as yourself. So it sounds really easy, right? All we have to do is love God and love our neighbor. But we know it's not that easy. And we know that we are honestly quite often very poor at doing it. There's a little bit of an intro into the first commandment. So now the first commandment, you shall have no other gods. Martin Luther, the easiest explanation, shortest that is, and easiest to memorize. What does this mean? We shall fear, love, and trust in God above all things. Now, one of the things we're going to be doing in class is, as part of our beginning each week, as a class, as we memorize these, we will recite them in class as well. And in a way, and the goal is that as we recite them, we will pray them. So in other words, when you say this, it's a prayer to God. So you're, in a sense, you're asking, help me do this. You're asking for forgiveness. And he is responding in prayer as you pray these words. So we all believe in something, right? But what do people put their trust in? It's a question for you to talk about as a family, and we'll have some other questions as well. In fact, in your worksheet, there will be some questions that will come up in a minute as well. But so what does it mean so talk about that a little bit. What do you trust in? What do a lot of people believe in? I just listened to a podcast today where the gentleman was saying he saw somebody that had a mask on, and on the mask it was printed believe. And so he asked him, well, what do you mean by that? Believe in what? And the man says, I don't care, just believe in something. And do you? What do you believe in? What do you trust in? When things get difficult, when things get scary, what do you put your trust in? And it can be people, it could be things, it could be yourself. What do you put your trust in? So what does it mean when Luther says we should fear, love, and trust in God above all things? Let's unpack those words a little bit here. When you fear God, you respect him. Now, part of this is fearing him in terms of you've broken these commandments, right? You love your parents, but when you know you have done something wrong and they know about it, there may be more of a sense of fear because you know you deserve punishment. That's a part of this as well, but it also means that we respect him and we trust in him. We'll talk about that word in a moment. And we know that everything is in God's hands. He's in charge of everything. And so we're quite dependent upon him that way. And with that dependence, utter, complete dependence for our lives today and for our lives in eternity, that does bring a sense of fear in that in his righteous judgment, he could choose to do anything, right? He could wipe us out today. He doesn't because of his love for us, but he very well could. But that also means that he provides for us everything that we need to. And that everything depends on him. So what does it mean to love God? Well, it means that we want to serve him and please him. We can kind of see this in family relationships, or oftentimes I like to talk about when a couple first falls in love, you do all kinds of nice things for them, and hopefully that doesn't end after the first couple weeks. But you want to do nice things for those people that you really, really love. We should want to do nice things for everybody, but certainly for those that are closest to us. And we want to please him. We want to make him happy. We want him to be happy with us. Just like you would a family or a friend, but even more so with God. And to love God means to expect only good from him. When two people fall in love, and if you teenagers can remember back to when you were little kids, at that point your parents could do no wrong, as they say. And when you first fall in love with somebody, you think everything about them is perfect. And so you expect only the best from them. And that's the same sense with God. We know, and we should fully expect, more so than anybody else, because God is without sin, we should expect only the best from God, and he provides it. So what does it mean to trust in God? Fear, love, and trust in God. We trust in God when we are confident in him, and when we have faith in him, when we cling to him, when things get rough or we know we need something, we turn and we hold on to him above anything else. And when we depend on him and when we put ourselves completely in his hands. That's what it means to trust God. Jesus even himself talks about the fact that the demons know all kinds of stuff about God, but they don't trust in him. Satan doesn't trust in God. He knows about God, but he does not trust in him. That's that difference again where we've talked about in terms of faith being more than just knowledge of something and agreeing with that knowledge, but it means actual relationship. So you can see that in Luther's explanation, right? To fear, love, and trust, those are all sort of a part of a relationship with somebody. Okay. So questions 4 and 5 in your worksheet, if you want to pause now, or if you want to come back, you can do that either way, are questions related to some specific Bible readings or text in the Bible that I want you to pause and read through and then answer some questions on those. And then we will go through these in class as well. But I will check to make sure, again, my encouragement is that you're doing this at home as a family. So, moving on now to question 6, then, if we trust in God, does that mean that we'll have no difficulties or hardships in life? No, it doesn't. It means that God will help us, God will strengthen us, and God will carry us through hard times. There will come a day when there are no hardships, but that's when Christ will come again. Now, we endure a sin-filled world and sin-filled lives with all the struggles that come with it. And we look forward to that day when there will be no difficulties or hardships. And in the process of all the struggles in life, we learn really what it means to fear, love, and trust in God above all things. Question 7, why can we trust God? Now I'm going to pause here for a minute and I'll have somebody in your family read this out loud from Romans chapter 8, verses 35 to 39. Okay, this is one of my favorite passages in all of Scripture. I just love this passage from Paul's letter to the church in Rome. And then the questions or the statements afterwards is that God does what he says he will do. Look at what he's already done for us. So none of these things that Paul is talking about, they're going to come into our lives, but God will always remain with us. He'll always strengthen us and carry us through these difficult times. And how do we know he will? Because this is a promise to us, right? How do we know it? We know it because of what his son endured for us and what his son did for us, right? So we know God will do these things. Nothing outside of us will separate us from God. He'll always be with us through them. We know it because we can look at Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. So that's it for what it means. What we've sorry, just looking at my worksheet here. That's the end of the video. Again, there's those couple things that you need to do as a family so that we can talk about them in class. We'll also talk a little bit about, just real quickly, there's two different ways that the Christian church has numbered the 10 commandments, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in class and probably in parent time as well. So anyway, that's it. We're off and running. The first commandment is done. Have a great rest of your day.